Raise your hand if you want your marketing to be boring and dull and hated by everybody. I thought so. Who wants their marketing to be boring and dull? Yet, like 99% of the technology and B2B marketing that I come across, especially in the technology services field, is kind of, well, forget it. I'm here to make it better, okay? I want to help make your marketing and your messaging stand out by being more exciting, more real, and carrying emotion. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions about what emotion is and its place in marketing, and especially in B2B marketing, because some people think, well, emotion, that should be safe for like the consumer stuff, right? No, sir. Emotion has its place in B2B, but it has to be used wisely. So what I'm going to help you with today is, number one, let's discuss how emotion fits into marketing and how you should use it in a conscious and constructive way. Okay, number two, we're going to talk about and dispel all the myths that surround B2B marketing and emotion in B2B marketing. And most importantly, third, I'm going to provide you with a structure with which you can sort of mine and unearth all the emotion that you want to communicate towards your prospects in your messaging. And now, this is not a super creative process, so you do not have to be a creative genius to realize and uncover what emotions you want to use in your marketing and to make your marketing messaging work in general. So this is not a creative process. It is a process, but it has a lot less to do with creativity than with understanding your strategy and your audience, which is the core of it, okay? And lastly, number four, we're going to talk about the single most important emotion that you tech companies should evoke in your audience. And no, it's not what you think. It's not fear. It's not greed. It's not whatever. It's a very simple emotion. So I want you to stick to the end because you're going to be surprised at that. All right, so let's dive into it. What is emotion? What is its place in B2B marketing? And what are some myths surrounding it? Okay, well, you want to use emotion because people usually make decisions based on emotions. Now, a lot of people will argue, nah, I'm the rational type. I always take the facts, mix them up, draw the line, weigh everything, and bam, that's the outcome, and that's how I make decisions. Now, without knowing who I'm talking to right now through the lens of my laptop camera, I can assure you that about 90% of the time, you do not work that way, okay? And let's take an example. Okay, we have two ladies, two CIOs. One is Sally, the other is, let's say, Susan, and one makes a decision based on brand, okay? They're both in the market for a solution. It doesn't matter what solution. It could be IT security or anything you want. And let's say Susan goes in and weighs some of the factors which are important to her. And the most important factors, which she ends up making the decisions on, is the coolness of the brand, the bonding with the brand, and the general feeling of the brand. So in other words, Susan totally makes her decision based on the brand experience that she has encountered while in the research phase. So she likes this one company, the complete experience, the milieu and everything, and then she goes with this decision. Okay, that's Susan. It's easy. Like, that is a 100% emotional decision. Now, what about Sally? Sally is in the market for the same solution. Again, pretend it's IT security. It doesn't really matter. And well, she has some considerations as well. And what she ends up deciding on is based on the effectiveness or the perceived cost effectiveness of the solution and the risk of implementation. And there's a third important, you could say, factor that influenced her decision making, which is that a given solution was recommended by her CEO. And so she ends up going with this solution because at the end of the day, it's what will get her fired the least, so to say, if things do go wrong, okay? So it turns out that Sally based her decision completely based on the fear of getting fired, and because she's very risk averse and has a high intolerance for uncertainty, she decided to go with what she thought was the safest solution. Again, this decision was based 100% based on emotion and subjective factors, okay? Now, in reality, things are a bit more mixed, but you could argue that the majority and the heavy weighing factors are usually not objective, but rather situation-based and emotion-driven, okay? So that's one thing we wanted to get clear on. All right, now, what are some myths about emotions? Okay, let's dive into the first one. Number one is that facts and emotions are mutually exclusive, which is what we just talked about. In the example, we had 100% emotional-based decisions, and one could argue that emotions and facts, they don't mix together. But the reality is that in most of the decisions that you make, they're both present, which means that what usually ends up happening is that you rationalize the decisions you have made on an emotional basis. So if you take the example of buying a car, for example, a lot of us will fall in love with a car, especially us guys. Like, we'll like the looks, we'll like the engine, the sound that the engine makes, and whatever else is associated with the brand. And so we decide to go with that car, and then we start to rationalize, okay, well, it gets a pretty good mileage. Well, it is set to be one of the safest on the market, and in addition, it is a very dependable car. But then if you take a car from another brand which doesn't have the looks but has the same parameters and the same reliability and similar mileage, you're not going to choose that. You're going to pay a lot more money for the one that is emotionally more bonding, that you have bonded with emotionally stronger. Okay, so you post-rationalize your emotionally based decisions. Okay, I hope that's not too much in this little episode, but let's go on with the myths. Okay, the other myth is that you cannot express emotion and remain professional at the same time. Wrong. Often, expressing and using emotion is associated with drama, which couldn't be further from the truth, because the way I see it, using emotion the right way is like using seasoning and using spices by a master chef, okay? Because when you have a great meal that a great chef has prepared, what ends up happening, what you end up experiencing is something really, really unique and colorful and memorable, and there will be no single spice or no single sensation that really, really sticks out, okay? So it's all done subtly. And that's the way that you should be using emotion in your B2B marketing. So it shouldn't be dramatic. It shouldn't be very, very emotionally charged. Well, most of the time it shouldn't be, because there is sometimes a place for that. But for most of the cases, it shouldn't be so emotionally charged that it would make it ineffective or unserious. But you should just blend it into the right steps of the sales funnel and the persuasion process, okay? Now, another myth. You need to focus on connecting on an emotional level. In other words, all you need to focus on is emotions, and you should just neglect the facts. Again, this is wrong, because just because emotions are important, it doesn't make the fact-based decision-making or the fact-based part of decision-making less important or unimportant, okay? The two have to go hand in hand. So you have to remember this, that people tend to rationalize their emotional decisions with facts. In other words, if this is true, then you have to provide them with the facts with which they will rationalize their emotional decisions. But even if you don't think that this is true, you still need a fact-driven approach to get to the emotions, because what ends up happening, especially as you go higher up the funnel and in terms of less awareness, so if you're on top of the funnel, a lot of times you're going to get attention and interest from facts, just communicating facts and learnings. And as the prospect's interest is growing, then you can start to incorporate emotion, because we have this, it's an 80-year-old model, probably the IDA model, where it's about how you move prospects through different phases of interest. First is IDA stands for attention, interest, desire, action. Okay, it's a very simple model, but it works to explain 99% of the things in marketing. Okay, so when you're still at the attention and interest grabbing levels, then a lot of times you can't really use emotion. You've got to get their attention with facts and pain points and all of that. So you need to start out with facts a lot of the times. And then as the prospect gets more drawn into the conversation, they step into your story, then you can start incorporating elements of story which evoke emotion and which will connect on a deeper level. Okay, so emotions and facts, they go hand in hand and they supplement and complement each other. Last myth is using emotion is manipulation. Now, this isn't necessarily the case because you can manipulate just as easily with facts. We all know that you can color facts, you can withhold information. So if your goal is to manipulate, you don't have to resort to emotions necessarily. Having said that, emotions can be misused, but just because you're consciously using emotion doesn't mean that you are actually manipulating. Just because you're wanting to connect on a deeper level with prospects, it doesn't mean that you are manipulating. How do you use emotion in a non-pushy and really cool and subtle way so that it makes a difference and it helps your marketing and messaging? Okay, I'm going to give you two frameworks. The one is to use story, and the other is to use something called the before-after matrix. Now, they're both pretty simple, and you don't have to worry because they don't require any creativity. What they do require is knowing your customer, and so you're not going to be able to get around that. So knowing the customer and having solid customer research is a must, okay? So there's no way of getting around that. Now, the first one is to use what's called a brand narrative. Now, in business, and especially in marketing, we often resort to using story and creating a brand narrative for brands because it helps customers actually step into a story, which will then take them from a state of lacking and from an undesirable state through something that is a very engaging journey to a desirable and a very happy ending, okay? And this can best be achieved with the tools of story. And two great representers of this methodology are Robert McKee and Donald Miller. And we use Donald Miller's story brand framework to create brand scripts. And what it usually does, how it unearths emotion, is that it first specifies the hero in the story. And the hero is always your customer, your buyer, okay? And your company is never the hero, so the narrative is always focused on the hero, on your customer. And the job of your company is that of a guide, okay? And the guide is the character who helps the hero achieve their goal and win at their mission, okay? And what happens when you start outlining the hero, the main character of the story, is that you try to really uncover the desired identity, it is called. So it's the identity into which they want to transform. Okay, and so when you're thinking about your buyer persona, let's say your buyer persona is a sales leader, well, maybe their desired identity is a revenue leader or some big, CFO position. And so that might be their desired state. So one way to use story and to entice emotion is to really hint at the fact that your solution, what it would really do is to help them step into that desired state. And now, most of the time, you can't just outright blatantly state that, hey, if you use my software, you're going to become a CFO in 2 months, okay? You can't really say that so directly, but what you can do is you can imply it. So you can say that revenue leaders always have their stuff together and they always have accurate reports and charts. And our tool helps you create accurate reports and charts. So there you're sort of tapping into that inner desire to become a revenue leader or a CFO, okay? So you, most of the time in B2B, you're going to use things in a subtle way like that. All right. And the other places using the story, the brand narrative, the story brand narrative, where you can tap into emotion is when you are thinking about the problems or the challenges of your customers. Now, most of the time, buyer persona research sort of stops at the at the external problem level, meaning that, for example, our sales leader, they need to meet deadlines and they need to get their stuff together, they need to create reports and they need to be accountable and they need to be bringing their numbers. Let's say, okay, these are all external problems. Now, if you go just one level deeper, is when you start getting more powerful. So if you go to the internal problems, otherwise known as psychological problems, then you are sort of connecting at a deeper level. Because, okay, what's an internal problem? Well, maybe it is fear of messing up and getting fired. That could be an internal problem. The wanting to advance into a higher position, that could be an internal thing that motivates them. Okay, so that is something you can tap into in your messaging. What's another internal problem? Well, it might be the feeling of overwhelm when you are managing a team and you have to, you're responsible to bring your numbers. And so you might just be confused and overwhelmed. So if your solution helps solidify this state, this problem, then that is something that you can tap into, that you need to communicate. Okay, again, in a subtle way, or sometimes in a not so subtle way. So, if your messaging goes, if you are being driven crazy by your sales team and you are, fearing management and you don't know how you're going to make the quarter's numbers and you need a simple solution to keep everything in order and aligned, then use this. Okay, so this messaging, it taps into not the external problem, which is the obvious level, but one level deeper, one level more personal, okay? And you can even go even deeper than that, because you can go to the level of the philosophical problem, which is sort of the good versus evil thing, where you bring in, it can get edgy, so you might want to be careful with using philosophical problems, because it can really go off track. But what this level is about is bringing up the good versus evil, or right or wrong, or some matter of injustice. So with our sales leader example, you can tap into the narrative of, well, as a sales leader, it's wrong that you have to worry about reporting so much. You didn't go to school to make charts and fill out Excel graphs and then, be yelled at for not bringing accurate numbers or whatever. So this is just plain wrong, and our solution is making this wrong right. Okay, so again, this is 2 levels deeper than the external problem. Okay, so again, external problem, internal problem, and philosophical problem. Right, okay, and the next framework that I'm going to show you is the before-after matrix. And if you click over to the blog post that goes with this podcast show, just go to clear.hu and then you'll find it under podcast. It's episode 11. You're going to find an example of the before-after matrix. And a before-after matrix is just basically 2 columns where you have, in the first column, you have the before state, and in the column next to that, you have the after state. And you're going in on the level of 4 or 5 dimensions. Okay, so the first dimensions is the have, the second dimension is the feel, the third dimension is the average day, the fourth is status, and the fifth, if you go into it, is the good versus evil. It's the philosophical problem, which we just talked about. Okay, so how to use this matrix? What you do is you list out all the things that your prospect has before using your solution and after using your solution. So in the example of a service company, tech service company, like the before would be a service company with low profitability. Okay, so this could be this example could be like my example in the case of our agency, Clear, serving technology service companies. Okay, so the before state is a service company with low profitability. The after state is a service company with high profitability. Hope marketing is another before state, or random or hope marketing, where you have no concept of marketing. And after using us, well, you have systemized and evergreen marketing, which works. Okay, so you sort of get the idea. Like before, you have fluctuation because people leave, because things are unpredictable. And after using us, you just have, you're attracting talent, and you have free time, and you have more fulfillment and bigger impact. And so these are all the things that you have before and after. Now, if you go one level deeper, you're on the level of feelings, right? So what happens here is, before using our service, you might have frustration. You might be experiencing frustration about not achieving things and missing targets. You might feel overwhelmed, uncertainty, and you might get the feeling that, or the sense that, you're fighting in a jungle with swamps with blood-sucking insects. And, a movie comes up where there's a hero like slashing through the jungles and all scraped and bloody. And so that's the feeling that our clients sometimes have before doing marketing with clear. Now the after state, the happy after state, is like winning. It's like flow. It's like riding a big wave on a surfboard. And rather than having uncertainty, you feel certainty and you feel in focus and you're winning with strategy and there's joy and rewarding and contribution and confidence and all those sorts of positive feelings. Okay, and then you go even deeper to basically strum the strings of emotion and feelings. You go to the average day. And if you look at what the average day of your prospect looks like before your solution versus after having enjoyed the benefits of your solution, you can go into stuff like, well, before they were giving away free consulting and chasing deals and chasing talent and doing soul-drenching cash flow management, whereas afterwards, delivering high added value services or devising new and high leverage training and coaching, or investing the profit. So isn't that a good problem to have when you got to think about how to invest the profit wisely rather than worry about cash flow, whether or not you were able to make payroll? Okay, so again, the before and after, it's a lot of levels and you're just poking into the emotions from different angles. Now, if you want to go even deeper, there's the status, okay? Because when you're talking to prospects, often what you can use is their desired status, how they look at themselves, and just dip into that. How they look at themselves before and what their desired identity is. We talked about this in the story brand framework, so this is about the desired identities. Because before working with us, we might want to say that they're one of those service providers in town, totally undifferentiated, and they don't feel special. Or they're just the average Joe IT company. And afterwards, well, their status is much more elevated because they're somebody with a reputation. They are a respected company. They are being featured in Forbes and they are viewed as the rainmaker. Okay, so you can feel how these different states, these different statuses are so much different. Okay, and the good versus evil, we talked about that. So in our market, what happens with IT companies is they often complain that, hey, it's not fair. There are companies who do a lot worse job than us, but they get better deals because they have better connections or they have better marketing. And we know that we can kick their butt, but we still don't get the good deals because our messaging is off, because our communication sucks. And that's just plain wrong. Okay, so this is another level that you can tap into. This is the good versus evil thing. And all of these things, they bring up emotion and they stir emotion. And if you don't overdo it, if you do it subtly and consciously and you just do it in the right amount, think about a cook, about an expert cook who uses seasoning and spices in just the right amount, and just a tiny grain of salt here and there, and it goes a long way. Okay? What's the number one emotion you want to spur in your prospects? And I got to tell you, it's nothing fancy or dramatic. It's simple. It's the feeling of, quote unquote, I can do this. Okay, it's a feeling of competence. Because what ends up happening with a lot of companies is that they almost have a deal done. Okay, so they're down at the bottom of the pipeline. There's, the prospect's got the budget, they have everything that they need to go forward, but then they stall. And I'm sure it's familiar to you. And the number one reason for that is the feeling of overwhelm. Okay, so even though the prospect knows they need the thing, even though they have the budget, it's authorized that they can go ahead with the investment, with the project, then something stalls. And it's usually from the feeling of overwhelm. It's like, oh man, if we start this project, what's going to happen? Things are going to fall apart over here. Something's going to go wrong over there. X and Y IT guy is not going to have the time. And then, so we need to finish that project first before we can move on to this project. So, and if there's so much conflicting feelings of overwhelm that they just put the project start off and they never sign the deal. Okay, so the number one feeling you need to create in prospects is that, hey, we can do this, we got this, and it's simple. And if you are the one who invokes that feeling in them, then it's very, very probable that it's your solution that they're going to choose, okay? Because a lot of times, it's not the better solution, it's not even the better marketed solution that wins, but it's the provider with whom the prospect feels that they can get the job done with, Okay, and it's not even about reputation. It's not how many times you've done this. Well, of course, that's all a part of it. But it's that, does the prospect believe that they can get this project done with you? That they can get the results with you? Will the integration work? And if they believe that, if they have the feeling of competence and confidence, then they're going to choose you. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for sticking around with this episode of the Electric B2B podcast. I hope to be talking to you soon, and have a great day.